Today we're doing, obviously from what's up on the board, we're going to be looking at the Magna Carta. With that, let's just get going. I'm going to begin with talking about a little bit of background to the Magna Carta, and that is the Magna Carta has had a huge impact on governance and how people are governed by different societies. We can look at our own history, perhaps beginning as far as democracy goes, back in Athens, Greece, so as much as 2,500 years ago. And in Athens, we had the development of something called democracy. Demos, meaning people, and krasi is power. So power to the people, in other words. Now, what's kind of interesting, of course, is people say power to the people. They say all citizens in Athens wrote the laws, but the key word there being citizens, because there were many people who were not allowed to vote. They would take a piece of broken pottery and put it in. It's an interesting thing that a lot of people don't realize in the original democracy is that there were two votes. There was a vote for who you wanted to lead, and there was also the opportunity to vote to get rid of a person as well. So theoretically, I think it would be possible for people to vote for, let's just say, Mr. Holden to lead their Athenian society. But if they had 6,000 votes that said that I was a dangerous person and they wanted me removed from Athens, then I would be. So that way you didn't end up with someone who is really dangerous or somebody who had perhaps created a following that was toxic. They could get rid of them. They didn't kill them. They did something worse than that to an Athenian, and that was to banish them, where they were not allowed to have food or water given to them within 50 miles. That would be a fate worse than death to most politicians, who just thrive on power. And of course, that's the people who thrive on power are exactly the people that you don't really want in power. Now, some people were citizens. Does anybody want to volunteer who was not a citizen in Athens? Certainly the people that got exiled couldn't vote. Peasants, yeah. Well, in that society of the peasants, I think we're probably looking at slaves. They couldn't vote. Who else couldn't vote? Yes, absolutely, Salome. In fact, it wasn't until relatively recently that women could vote even in Canada. Yes, people born outside of Athens couldn't vote. Deaf people. Well, I'm not sure, Quentin, about that one. I think I have to do some research on that. Yes, children, you had to be 18 years of age. You had to be a male. And you actually had to be a landowner as well. And interestingly enough, that was the case in Canada for the longest time too. You had to own a certain amount of land before you could vote. Democracy wasn't perfect. We're just looking at a step up from where we were. And with Rome, democracy had its struggles, but did a better job of representing the plebeians, who were the common people, who otherwise had been ruled for many years by the patricians, and these were wealthy landowners. The lawmakers in Rome were called senators, and later today we're going to take a bit of a field trip, and we're going to go and visit a Roman Senate, as well as some other places. Now, the problems with the Magna Carta originated because England's government was not a democracy. It was a monarchy. And a monarchy, mono being one, of course, and archa being leader. So one leader. And what the king said, or the queen if she was in power, what they said went. And so here we have a king, and he doesn't look very happy. So anybody want to offer a guess as to who this particular individual would be? No guesses? Yes, this fella is King John, the younger brother of Richard the Lionheart. And he doesn't look very happy. He doesn't look very happy in these pictures either. But of course, he looks different in all these pictures, and that's because we don't have a photograph of him. There was no such photographs back then. And interesting, I think that there were plenty of portraits around at that time, but we don't have an actual portrait of King John. Maybe he was shy of having a portrait done. John ruled England while his elder brother, King Richard the Lionheart, had been away, having a great time fighting in the Crusades. And of course, you guys know all about that now. He's famous as Prince John in the stories of Robin Hood. And in the stories, he's wicked and foolish. He taxes the people of England unfairly. Some say he was just as foolish in real life as in the stories, but others just say he was simply unlucky. After the death of King Richard, who of course died fighting in France, he ruled England as King John from 1199 to 1216. He didn't rule all that long, but huge impact on the world. And of course, Robin Hood became famous as the one who took from the rich and gave to the poor. Absolutely. Yeah, 17 years can be a long time when you're being ruled by a dictator, someone who is not exactly benevolent either. He got into trouble, as medieval kings could, if they didn't have the qualities of being a king. There was plenty of kings who were loved by their people. Strong leadership was appreciated and actually needed. It was dangerous times. There were constant border disputes. And if you didn't want your town getting raided, and you know the kinds of things that happened when those towns did get raided, having a strong central government that could act quickly and decisively. If you could imagine, our parliament making decisions about what to do about ISIS, for instance, and it could take months. But if a force was on your borders ready to attack, the last thing you want is a parliament taking months to make a decision about what to do. Yeah, John had many different names. John had a number of problems that sort of led to names like that. One of them was that he quarreled with the Pope about how to run the church. So the Pope, as we'll see in slides to come, had a say in the church for England and everywhere, in fact, because it was the Catholic Church dominated everywhere. But King John didn't want to go along with it. And the Pope got a little bit angry and excommunicated not only King John, but all of England. And that was a problem for the people. As you can see, we've got a hierarchy of power with peasants and serfs at the bottom. I'd almost call them slaves. And I would suggest, too, that as we look at this pyramid, it's not really proportional when you look at how many monarchs there were to peasants. There was only one monarch, and there may have been 50 or 100 nobles, and considerably more vassals and knights, and of course considerably more merchants, farmers, and craftsmen. But when you looked at the number of peasants and serfs, they would undoubtedly outnumber greatly all the rest in this pyramid. Huge numbers. But all of these, peasants and serfs included, not only under the monarch, but they were all under the Pope and the church. And in this case, the monarch decided to remove the rest of them from being under the Pope, and there were consequences for that. And here we have the Pope saying, "This is my decision, not yours." And King John wanted to be the one to choose who would be the Archbishop of Canterbury. So he was excommunicated, which I'm sure John didn't like too much, as it caused problems for him. Problem number 2. John went to war twice against the French king. And if you remember, the French king actually had been an ally of the English in the Crusades, an experienced king when it came to warfare. And King John's army was badly beaten. When John went to war against the French king, he hired mercenaries. And of course, mercenaries are soldiers that are not necessarily fighting for their land and their country. They're fighting for money. Whereas a lot of people might be quite motivated to protect their families that reside in the country that they're fighting for. When you're fighting for money, it's not always as motivating. You could actually leave and to fight again another day. I suppose if you were deserting, you ran the risk of being killed. But in this case, his mercenaries, all they managed to do is drain the treasury in England. they didn't manage to win back any land in France. So he was also given another name of Soft Sword. In other words, he wasn't very strong when it came to battle. So John raised taxes in England to pay for the wars, and this upset his barons. He ordered them to pay far more tax than earlier kings had done.
Stories from Parliament. Magna Carta. England, February 1215, and all is not well. Across the country, from north to south, the voices of angry barons can be heard. The cause of their anger? One man.
King John.
He demands even higher taxes to pay for his futile wars in France.
And if we do not pay up, he takes what he wants. We have to find a way to stop him raising taxes whenever he chooses.
And taking our land.
Well, stealing our
He
land.
promised that all this would stop.
Oh, he always promises.
Yeah, well, his promises mean nothing. We must do something to make him keep his word.
We are the Baron Lords of England, yet he shows us no respect.
He can arrest us and hold us prisoner without a fair hearing.
Yeah, our widowed sisters and mothers can be forced into a marriage just because the king orders it.
Our rights and freedoms should be protected by law.
Oh, King John believes he is above the rule of law.
Then we must have new rules, which even a king must obey.
And it is not just the barons who believe it is time to act. The Archbishop of Canterbury himself intervenes.
He may be above the laws of men, but no one is above the laws of God.
Pray silence for Stephen Langton, the Archbishop of Canterbury.
My lords, you have come here today from all corners of England. Tell me, what are your concerns? Robert Fitzwalter, Lord of Dunmow Castle, speak first.
My lords, when our king raises taxation yet again, he offends the people. When he seizes lands that do not belong to him, he offends the barons. And when he seizes the wealth of the church, he offends God.
Richard de Clare, Earl of Hertford, you wish to speak?
My Lord Fitzwalter is right, but what can we do? The king cannot be reasoned with. He's too powerful.
Then we must find a way to limit his powers.
How will we do that? There are no rules which a king has to obey.
We will make new rules.
He won't listen to us. He refuses to recognize our rights. We have no voice.
Then we must declare our rights and find a voice. We must send a clear message to the king. He must agree to limit his power.
And if he does not agree?
Then together we will raise a great army. We will take London and leave him no choice.
But even when he knows that the barons are taking action, King John continues to raise taxes and seize lands which do not belong to him.
Your Majesty, the rebels advance towards London.
Really? Let them advance where they like. I have nothing to fear from Robert Fitzwalter and his rabble.
They gather support, Your Majesty. The closer they get to London, the stronger they become.
I told you, I have nothing to fear. The people of London will stand by their king.
I'm not so sure, Your Majesty. Fitzwalter calls his troops the army of God. I believe the people of London are on his side.
I don't care. I don't care whose side the people are on. I will not submit. No king of England will ever obey rules laid down by traitors.
A messenger from London, Your Majesty.
Approach, speak.
Your Majesty, Fitzwalter is in London.
And
The people cheer him.
they cheer a rebel traitor who dares to stand against his king.
Yes, Your Majesty.
Perhaps, Your Majesty, it is time to talk to the rebels.
Never. I am the King of England. I do not talk to traitors.
But King John will talk. He has no choice. and on the 15th of June, 1215, at Runnymede near Windsor, the two sides meet. The barons present the king with a document. 63 rules have been written down on parchment. This will become one of the most important and famous documents in history. People will call it the Great Charter, Magna Carta.
Force widows to marry against their will.
Agreed.
You will not raise taxes without the agreement of the barons.
Agreed.
No free man can be imprisoned without being charged.
Agreed.
Every man has the right to a fair trial.
Agreed.
And 25 barons will watch you carefully to make sure that you obey these rules.
Agreed.
King John places his royal seal on the document so that the whole world will know that he has agreed to obey these new rules. Of course, this document doesn't put an end to the quarrels between kings and barons. Some of the rules are quickly changed, and many are broken or ignored. But on the 15th of June, 1215, something important has happened. Magna Carta has shown for the first time that it is possible to lay down rules which even a king must obey. Some of those rules apply to this day.
And so the barons were a little bit upset, primarily because it was costing them too much money, which is usually a very strong motivator in our society at any time, is money. Now, it did talk in there about freemen not being jailed without a trial. And again, remember that just as we go back to Athens, the idea of who is a free man, was another question. Primarily, these laws that the barons enforced upon King John were laws that benefited themselves. But this did change over time. In 1214, many barons rebelled. They felt they were being treated unfairly, and they actually forced a charter on him. It wasn't called the Magna Carta, but it became known as that. And here's a picture showing King John signing the Magna Carta. And of course I love this picture. Just look at the look on his face. As you can imagine, King John was not pleased about having to do this. But where he could ignore them, he often did. And again, they had barons that were kind of watching over King John to make sure that the rules were followed. But primarily, I think that they were mostly concerned that the rules were being followed when it came to them. This is the place in Runnymede where the Magna Carta was signed. Interestingly enough, when we go back to 1215, that is 800 years since the Magna Carta was signed. And the Magna Carta has a great deal of significance around the world, and it could be argued more significance outside of England than inside of England. And in fact, what's kind of interesting is this whole shrine that's been built to the Magna Carta was actually sponsored by an American group, not by a British group. Why is the Magna Carta so important in the 21st century? Well, the ideas influenced fair government, not just in Great Britain, where it indeed did, but also it influenced the United States Constitution, the laws, in other words, for the United States, spring from the Magna Carta. And here we see, if you look at the Supreme Court building, of course the laws are governed by the Supreme Court. You can see a picture of King John. There's King John with his stamp, putting his seal to the Magna Carta right there. Can anybody tell me what place this would be? It helps that there's a title to it. It's the House of Commons, but the House of Commons for where? Yep, it's our House of Commons. And actually, you guys are going to get a chance to go there and actually stand in the House of Commons, because we do have a build for that House of Commons. If there's a Canadian flag there, that's an awfully good hint. Yes, and also you're going to get to go see the Senate as well. That's actually going to be your task to do. Now, it says he died in 1216. That, of course, we're talking about King John. His legacy is that of being a foolish leader. He put his mother in jail. Anybody want to venture the name of his mother? No one's going to venture a guess. Queen Eleanor of Aquitaine. And he tried to steal power from his brother. If you remember, King Richard pretty much had to cut short his crusade in the Holy Land because he had word that his younger brother, King John, was usurping his power back in England. So off he went back to England. All right, so the Magna Carta was really instrumental in our own government. And what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to come over. So I need you guys to all stand up. And I need you to come with me over to the teleport. Okay. And so we're going to begin a little bit of a historical field trip here, and we're going to begin with the Greek Forum. So make sure that you keep your scribbler on, and I'm going to unlock the Greek Forum, and you can join me there. Okay, if you guys want to join me. And here we find ourselves. This is a relatively new build in our world of Viamus. And as you can see, everybody has kind of an equal place. Very important to the Greeks. As long as you were a wealthy landowner, you deserved an equal place with all the other wealthy landowners. So you can take a seat. We don't have the screen operational yet, but what will happen is there's going to be a screen that will pop up in the middle that everybody will be able to see from where they're at. And we'll be able to do presentations in an area like this and have debates and conversations. Yeah. Okay. The next challenge for you is that somewhere here in Viamus, and actually where this is located, if you know in Viamus, it's kind of set up around the Mediterranean. But this is set up in the northern part of the Middle East, right about where Turkey would be. And Turkey is always a place that I've wanted to travel to because not only do you see a lot of Christian artifacts from the days of early Christianity, like Antioch and all the rest of that, but you also see antiquities that have to do with the Muslim Empire, the Ottoman Empire, but also the Greeks and the Romans. They're all over this place. So you see a lot of Roman architecture, Greek architecture, and stuff like that too. So the next place I want you to go to is I want you to go to the Roman Senate. And I'm not going to tell you where it is. I just want you to go and, given your knowledge of the Mediterranean, find it. See you there in 60 seconds. If you just want to join me, I'm at the steps of the Senate right now. And if you want to go up the stairs and click on the door, you can go inside. And again, another place where we could conduct classes that have to do with Roman studies. But it was pretty much divided up, and I would love to see this represented a little bit better. All these characters being so similar, in fact, identical. But on one side, you'd have the plebeians, which are basically the common people. Their representatives, that is. And then on the other side, you'd have the representatives of the patricians. And those were the moneyed people with influence and power and the ability to get things done. Now, they had maybe the money for weapons if there was a war, and armor and horses and all the rest of that stuff. But of course, those things are no good without soldiers, and they needed the plebeians as well. So they would negotiate the roles that they would play in work projects and wars and all those kinds of things in a place like this. All right, and you know, in some ways, it's not so different. Today, some people would argue that perhaps the Conservative government represents the people who are moneyed. I know that in our own BC legislature, there was a new budget that came out that reduced taxes for people who earned over $150,000 a year, but it basically increased taxes for those who earn less. So some people would say that some parties represent the moneyed people, and some parties represent those who don't have money and would like the people with money to pay more. And arguments can be made, of course, for both sides. You'll see this in our parliament that we have the parties are divided, and that's actually where I would like us to go right now, is that I would like you to find Canada's House of Commons. Okay, if you'd all like to join me, Josh came very close. Josh found the Senate. And that's one place we do want to end up going, but we'll go there after we've found the House of Commons. So, of course, we've come to Canada, and in Canada there's the teleport area, and all kinds of really interesting places that you can go to that have some connection with Canada here. Here's the BC legislature. You could certainly go into there and learn a lot about the BC legislature, but we're going to go into the House of Commons. So just follow me through this teleport. Would be great. And so here's the House of Commons, and you'll notice that on the floor, Salome is just stepping over two very, very large swords. And these swords are laid out in the middle like this. Can anybody tell me why? It has to do with a tradition that goes back to the British parliamentary system. Oh, those are great ideas. It has no, it does have to do with stabbing, but not about stabbing people's feet. Because the men who would show up to Parliament would be wearing swords, and they would get in quite heated debates. The chairs between the opposing parties were set back more than 2 swords lengths apart, and that was to prevent parliamentarians from killing each other with their swords. So they had to keep their seats, and having kept their seats, they couldn't do anything to harm each other. Now, if you take a look, and so some of you have been up above and looking down, you can see the seating here. There's many more blues tags on the seats, and those, of course, are the Conservative members of Parliament. And if you look on the desk, you might just find Prime Minister of Canada's. About where I'm standing, right where the sword is, you'll see Harper's tag. And if you click on Harper's tag, you get a bit of a history of Harper and all the other parliamentarians that represent BC and other places across Canada. So this is a pretty good representation of you see up above the outside of the Parliament buildings, and it was very interesting to go there. This is what it looks like, having been there. But there's also another part to Parliament, and that is that we have a Senate. And so I'd like to invite you guys to find the Senate at this point, and that's where we'll end off today. You might want to follow me. I think this is the way over here. Here's a picture of the Senate over here in the hallway. And if you go through that door, and this is what the Senate looks like. And again, it's very much like this, the same colors, the seating, everything. Some would argue that the seats are a little bit too comfortable because a lot of these senators like to doze off during their debates. And a good gig if you can get it. They get paid well to go and listen to what goes on, and their role is actually as representatives of sort of the common people of Canada. They're people that supposedly are appointed because we look up to them and consider them to be great Canadians, and their role is to make sure that Parliament doesn't look after just the people who put them in office, but are looking after the needs of all Canadians. So if a bill is passed by Parliament, it needs to go through the Senate and get its approval before it can get final reading and be passed into law. So anyway, you've had quite a little lesson today on our parliamentary system and where our rights and privileges come from, going back 800 years ago to the Magna Carta. And with that, I think that is our lesson for today. And so I'd like to thank you for joining me. And again, I will be putting this on tape in the study carols so that you can view that and review it. I think that there will probably be a quiz coming out on some of the things that we've looked at today. So we're just over 45 minutes today. Thank you for joining me. And by all means, if you want to go back to the Roman Senate, or if you want to landmark any of these places to teleport back into them, there's some interesting things missions that you can look at. Outside of the Roman Senate, for instance, there's a mission that's been made up by some students, and that would be a really interesting thing for you folks to follow up on and do. With that, I'm going to bid farewell and turn off the tape.